Today, I'm going to share a story with you about a solution to climate change I helped create that integrates three topics you've likely never heard in the same sentence: real estate development, school children, and worms. I promise you they're all deeply interconnected. I'd like to begin today by introducing you to a problem that existed in my community. I'm from a small town in Connecticut, and near my former high school is this old manufacturing facility called the Gilbert embedded wire mill site. The wire mill was in operation from 1848 to 1998, manufacturing various wire products. What's really interesting about this company was how innovative they were. They actually invented wire mesh there. So many people say that they invented summer because their invention allowed people to open up their windows and with their brand new window screens, enjoy the warm summer air without letting mosquitoes and other bugs into their homes. Unfortunately, today, the mill lies derelict in the center of town. It's unoperational, and it's contaminated from the 150 years of metal manufacturing that happened there, classifying the site as what's called a brownfield. We're not creating jobs there, we're not generating tax revenue, and we've really lost our heritage of the industrious working spirit that once existed in Georgetown. So 5 years ago, recognizing this problem, a local artist from my community, Jane Philbrick, decided to work with this problem in a really unconventional way. She decided to engage the town's most unlikely and most overlooked constituents, the local school children. So I arrived at my 10th grade math class a few months later to find an invitation on my desk inviting me to apply for an internship opportunity in art, architecture, and future planning. This sheet read that my ideas would be examined, developed, reworked, and maybe even realized. Curious, it asked, and I was, especially when I met the two really cute Swedish architecture students that Jane had brought along to work with us. So I applied. Fast forward a few months later, and here is a photo of a group of rewire interns from the local middle and high schools. I'm in the back row on the left. Each high schooler was assigned to be principal of a different research vertical related to what we envisioned for the site. This included food and farming, architecture, green energies, transportation, and fashion. And we were encouraged to share knowledge with each other and cross-pollinate ideas as much as possible. Over the next couple of years, we sketched, and we built models, and we built even bigger models. And to bring it full circle, the studio that we performed all of this work in is actually the same building that the owners of the wire mill had constructed a year earlier as a schoolhouse for the children of the mill workers. Building on our research with the younger children, we, the high schoolers, created a master plan of what we envisioned for the site. The most novel part of this whole experience is that we were asked, for the first time in our lives, what we wanted to see built in our community. It would seem that this is a sensible question to ask our young people, but we rarely ever ask in a meaningful way. From the 2 years of work with the Rewire school children and many other experts that we engaged along the way, Rewire led to the creation of a real estate development company called TIL, of which I am co-founder. I encourage you to think about who is meaningfully engaged in the real estate development process. Do you have a meaningful say in what's built around you? Our process works to engage all stakeholders in the real estate development process, including architects, yes, financiers, yes, politicians, of course. But we also engage the future of our societies, the ostensible beneficiaries of what we're going to build, our young people. But from our 4 years of pre-development work, one theme emerged as particularly relevant to all of us. There was one aspect of the building process that we all felt uncomfortable about, and that we needed to find a solution for before we moved forward with our vision for the site. And that one fact is that currently, 40% of the world's energy is used in buildings. This makes buildings the largest contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions. Contributing to this problem by repeating conventional methods of construction was not part of our vision for the world we wanted to grow up in. You might be thinking, Olivia, can't you just solve that with some solar panels and a wind farm? In part, yes, and that's certainly part of our development model. But astoundingly, what that 40% figure does not include are what we call embodied emissions. And embodied emissions are those created in the manufacturing of construction materials. For example, the steel and concrete that we manufacture to pave over surfaces and to build buildings on top of them actually contribute many tons of CO2 into our atmosphere every year. And beyond that, when we use things like concrete to pave over our surfaces, we actually cause biological death of the soil underneath, meaning that we're destroying soil's capacity to capture excess carbon in our atmosphere and store it deep underground in really stable carbon stores called carbon sinks. And it's actually our earthworms that are most crucial in bringing that carbon from the atmosphere into the soil, deep into the ground. When we pave over our soil, we kill those worms and all related microbial life, thereby destroying soil's capacity to act as these incredibly important carbon sinks. So, if we're to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and mitigate climate change, we need a two-part solution. We need to reduce energy consumption, yes, especially in the built environment with things like solar panels and wind farms. But we also need to find ways to create additional carbon dioxide storage. So the central question for our team then became, wouldn't it be great if we could find a way to turn large-scale real estate development into sites for carbon dioxide storage, as opposed to the carbon factories that they currently are? How would one do that? We'll use a method called phytoremediation, which uses plants to not only take out the toxins in the soil, but phytoremediation also allows the soil to continue sequestering carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in the soil. In addition to practicing phytoremediation, we won't be relying on steel or concrete to build. In their place, we'll use a material called cross-laminated timber, or CLT. And CLT is just a fancy name for a type of engineered wood that's actually as strong as steel. But what's unique about CLT is that it's 50% sequestered carbon. To put that into perspective, some estimates calculate that a single 5-story CLT building is able to cut emissions by levels equivalent to removing 600 cars from the road for a year. So by combining phytoremediation and building raised above the ground out of cross-laminated timber, our team has created a model of real estate development that isn't contributing to climate change at all. In fact, our model is carbon negative, meaning that it buys us time in climate change. Now you might be wondering, Olivia, is it really safe to live above these remediating landscapes? And what I would say in response is that this is about shifting our focus from removing any exposure to any hazard in our environment to thinking about the pathways by which we're exposed to contaminants. A quick analogy is, what if I told you that you were going to be walking down the street and I was going to send a 2-ton hurtling object past you at 40 miles per hour? Olivia, you would say, please don't do that. Put up a barrier and protect me, right? And if you haven't guessed yet, what I'd be describing is a sidewalk. Just as sidewalks protect us from cars. Living separate and above these landscapes protects us from the contaminants below. And actually, our research demonstrates that living and working in these phytoremediating brownfields is not only safe and possible, but actually creates a healthier atmosphere than is the norm in urban conditions. To close, I'd like to go back to that original line that encouraged me to apply to Rewire in the first place. It said, your ideas will be examined, developed, reworked, and maybe even realized. What began as a problem specific to my community has transformed into a solution that can be applied globally to help slow down climate change. There are 2 to 3 million brownfields in the United States alone. It's likely that there's a brownfield not too far from where you live. What if we turned every one of those 2 to 3 million brownfields into economically productive carbon storage sites? That's a world I want to live in. Thank you.